Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Political No Brainer, the podcast where we move past winner takes all politics and into real conversation. I'm Jeff Rabinowitz, and this season we're bringing in voices from all sides to challenge assumptions, bridge divides, and build a better understanding of today's biggest issues. Let me introduce everybody. We've got Charlie Heinemann joining us today. I think Beth DeRicchio will be joining us soon. Charlie Heinemann is joining us today. We've got Kevin Howard, author of Onward at Last. And it's a great book. I've been digging into it, and I found so much of it interesting. Even the forward was, I printed that. I made some notes. I want to dig into it. Um, One of the things I read, the first thing I read in the forward was, our society contains no method of serious self-criticism. So let me say, political no-brainer could be that method at some point in time. Could be that one where we beat each other up. I mean, we disagree and we agree, but civilly, and that's a beautiful thing. We don't get mad at each other. We're going to be friends for life. Charlie and I have been going on 30 years of friendship now. Beth, 30 years of friendship now. I think we've always been on sort of the same page, and I think Kevin's on the same page in a lot of ways, and that's what really matters. That's what makes America great. We don't need to make it great again. It's always been the greatest. We always need to improve, but and this is how we do it. This is how we do it through civil conversation. So, guys, welcome. You guys want to kick it
Welcome
off with
here.
anything in particular? Or
So,
Kevin, why don't you start off? How did you get
Absolutely.
into,
I No, go ahead, Coach Drippy. How did I get
well,
into what?
authoring a book, all the things you've done in your life? You've been in the military for 4 years. Um, just tell us about yourself. Tell us about the book, why you decided to write a
Yeah.
book.
Well, hey, you talk about American dream. I mean, I am the second generation. I'm a second generation American. My mother came here from Panama as a teenager and became a naturalized American citizen and got married and had kids, obviously, and then and raised me and my brother to really love America because she knew different. She was from Panama. She understood different. This is pre-Noriega, from Panama and stuff like that. Hey, I came out, hit the ground running. I mean, I joined the military at 18, right out of high school, married my high school sweetheart, and off we were serving in NATO under President Reagan. So dating myself, I'm 59, and and it was a heady time to be in the military and serve the country and get a start. That gave me the seed money for my college education. Then got out of the military after serving 4 years after duty and just started to build my American dream. Undergrad at the University of Houston, graduate school at the University of Connecticut, and then I became a banker because I wanted to invest. I wanted to provide customized financial services to entrepreneurs to create their American dreams. And that's how I was going to create my American dream, by helping others. And built a nice career, 25 years of that. But then I'm really, I love the environment. I love nature. I love being outside. I love what's happening. And I started to learn over the last 20 years that climate is a thing. It really is a problem. Everything is not politics. There are some facts that can drive us. And factually speaking, we are having a problem with global warming. We're having a problem with climate. It is destabilizing the ecology that sustains us, that supports the global economy. And so I shifted my career into climate risk management and consulting. Well, along that journey, as I was figuring stuff out and seeing all the changes in our country, I started realizing that so many of the things that we're told, whether it's the values and virtues that define us as Americans, or it's the narratives that help us understand each other and the world around us, so a lot of these things are not true when you measure them against what we learn as we make choices, as we navigate our paths in our lives, the wisdom of our actual experience. And so I decided to write well, I just started writing a blog, right? And I wrote these commentaries, just to say, to point out the distinctions between what we're being told and what works in our actual lives. And that ultimately became the book Onward at Last. And so that's what brings me here today, is to talk about, well, look at the prevailing narratives we're dealing with today. We're dealing with a massive announcement of a series of tariffs that is absolutely destabilizing the globalization policy that has been instituted over the last 40 years, in terms of expanding the source of labor to the lowest cost, highest talented markets around the world, which have basically undermined the American labor, right? Over the last 40 years. And so that whole system of globalization is being destabilized by President Trump, committing to this massive new tariff regime that he's drawing us back to 110 years, 115 years pre-World War One, economic policy, where we did everything within our country and we charge people a premium to sell us stuff from outside. So I'd love to talk about that. That is the biggest thing. That's what's disturbing the stock market, what's disturbing, what's dominating the financial news. I'd love us to start there.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. I was just reading a story about, again, you see the damage of going at this with, let's say, a chainsaw as opposed to a scalpel. How this affects at a micro level, not even micro, but a smaller level. There's this one small country in southern part of Africa. It's about 2 million people, but they're pretty much their entire economy is this Levi's factory, right? So it's either the people who work at that factory or the service industry that supports the people who live in that, the housing and the service industry that takes care of the people who work in this one giant factory. So it's like 90% of their economy is exporting these jeans to the United States. It will absolutely end that country. Like the tariffs that imposed on that country effectively dissolve its entire economy overnight, and the entire thing, for no reason other than it's caught up in this, this hard to define, explain a wash of tariffs that they did, that insane list that he put on a cardboard piece of
chloroplast.
Just
Charlie, I hear exactly what you're saying, but let's put it into some historical context. Again, we have, and we were starting to talk about this before we came on the air. There has been a long history of globalization, certainly post World War II, But I would, just to throw this out there, say we have globalization 1.1, which was from like post World War II, 1950 to about 1980. Then we have globalization,
you can even go back farther, right? Because the initial one was really around, like, say, 1880, 1890, when we first started steamship travel and the telegram. And I mean, that was the first. That was the first initial globalization that ended basically with World War One, right?
Yeah, that's the only reason I didn't go back that far is because we dismantled it and we had different mechanisms. And so basically Bretton Woods, post World War II, is the world that we are still functioning out of, right? And so you had these two different waves. In the 1950 to 1980, globalization from an American perspective was opening up international markets to get access to natural resources at the most reasonable prices, right? And so the whole idea of Nixon going to China and opening up China and stuff like that. Now, okay, so that was that period of time. But in that first period of time, we manufactured and our production was domestic, right? We got the natural resources from the Middle East. We got the natural resources from all over the world, from Africa, but we manufactured here in the United States. Then we shifted international trade policy starting in the 80s and then in the early 90s to where we incentivized U.S. multinational corporations to be able to shop for labor internationally. And what the net effect of that, it was a boom for China. It was a boom for South Korea. It was a boom for Mexico. India, all the places with talented, low-cost labor benefited because we shifted our manufacturing there. Taiwan and all these places. Okay, at the expense of the American middle class and the American working class. Okay, if you look at what globalization, this is globalization 2.0. What we've done in globalization since 1980 to 2025, right? Okay. What that second period of globalization did was it commoditized the amount of contribution that American labor gets out of American GDP by making them compete against lower cost labor around the world. We sent the jobs around the world. And so what has happened? All the data, major data, economic data demonstrates that incomes for the middle class and the working class have basically stayed flat for 45 years, while the GDP of the country has expanded significantly, and most of that profit has gone to the owners of the businesses and to the professional class. So we have this massive cavern of wealth and income inequality. Okay. Okay. So what is happening today? That middle class, that working class who got abandoned by globalization 2.0 since 1980, tried to elect Bernie Sanders as the anti-establishment, right? And the Democratic Party smothered them twice, right? Okay. So they have shifted to Donald Trump. I mean, the Heritage Foundation did a study for the last three presidential elections. And the study was basically simple. What percentage of the GDP for the counties in America voted for Trump versus what percentage of the GDP for the counties in America who voted for the Democratic nominee, right? Well, in 2024, the Trump counties represented 38% of the GDP of the country, and the Kamala Harris counties represented 62%. And the reason why of that distortion, even though the majority or plurality is with Trump, is because that is how little the working class and the middle class have of our GDP, right? This is what elected him. And they elected him to dismantle globalization. So, yes, I feel bad for this country in Africa and many countries around the world who had some benefit from globalization. They did. They had some benefit, just like China had some benefit, right? But the reason why this is happening, just like the reason why Brexit happened in England, is because the European Union, is because globalization did not benefit working class and middle class people.
And it's always been that way. I mean, it was the undoing of the first push of globalization, right? There's always been massive inequity that's a result of the globalization. It's just a matter of putting a spotlight on it. I mean, it's always been there. And then, I think the first two rounds really, um, you know, ended basically because of the two wars, right? Each war pretty much ended that period of globalization for a period of time, and then it comes back, right?
But the thing about globalization 1.0, 1950 to 1980, is it created, it was the period of the greatest American middle class or working class ever. You've had working class people who could afford to buy a house in an American city. This is what All in the Family was all about. I mean, Archie Bunker is supposed to be every man, right? This is non-college educated, unionized working class who owns a house in a suburb of New York and and still can send his daughter to college, right? That used to be the American working class and American middle class. Today, the average middle class double income family can't afford to buy a house in a major American city. I mean, it's
Well,
a
no,
whole
no, no.
new.
There is a struggle, like you said, that the average American family is at a crossroad where, like you said, they can't buy a house. They're literally, getting to the point where they may be living in their parents' house for the rest of their life, for all we know. But here's the thing now, and I'm just going to point this out. I play this game. I call it. There's a game in Hollywood called Six Degrees to Kevin Bacon. I call it Six Degrees to World Economics, and it goes to Warren Buffett. He's the guy. He's the Kevin Bacon.
Guy.
So many, many years ago, he bought a company called Dexter Shoes. He paid $8.5 billion for the company with A shares of Berkshire. So he gave them a piece of Berkshire to buy this company. He
Mhm.
literally made a statement, I'm clopping my heels. This is such a great deal. And the company turned out to be worthless within a few years of buying it because of the cheap labor factor. China was making shoes at half the price with shipping. Dexter Shoes got annihilated. So as far as cheap labor and worldwide cheap labor, there is no turning back. Now, when we talk about Brexit, keep in mind one thing. If you ask Sergey Bin what's the most Googled thing ever, after Brexit became reality, Brexit became the most Googled thing because people in Britain had no idea what they voted for. British people had no idea what they voted for. American people had no idea when they voted for Donald Trump and this coroplast. He went to QuickScience to produce basically a thumbnail sketch of his tariffs. Then, like Charlie said, you've literally just decimated one in particular country. Their whole functionality is gone. They're not going to eat. They're going to die. That is their source of income. Just like had the Jane Fonda effect, where she said they're chaining kids to machines. Well, they stopped chaining the kids to the machines, but they also stopped paying them, and the kids had nothing then.
The other thing you see about, for me, just just recently, the last couple of days, we're reading up on globalization and the history of it too, is that what you see pretty quickly is how fragile it is. And the longer it's been around, the more fragile it becomes, because those supply chains become so complex, much more so than they were 100 years ago, right? So, what started with, if you look at starting with, like, say, 2008 and, and the Great Recession, the effects of that compounded a few years later by COVID, where you completely messed up with these supply chains. You saw how complex it is and how easy it is to completely break the whole thing down.
Yep.
And people feel the effects of that immediately. Now, again, obviously, the average voter isn't thinking about these things, right? They're voting based on what they see right in front of them, how their life is affected. 70% of the elections in that last cycle all went to change agents. It was going to happen no matter what. It didn't matter. Right. This thing was said and done before. It did. We can talk about the campaign and the whole thing with Biden staying in too long and him losing his faculties and all the things they could have done differently. It didn't matter. It was going to be a change agent. It had
to be a change.
It was without a doubt. But sadly, I just I think there was something to that change was needed. Unfortunately, it's the process of the way it's being implemented is so clumsy, haphazard, where it didn't need to be. Like my more conservative parts of my brain come alive when I start seeing these. I'm like, there's a lot of things we should have done with these tariffs that could be implemented that needed to be done in a correct way. But this whole shock and awe thing, which is just such a Trump type thing, where rather than do what's necessary, we got to do it at a level that's breathtaking and stuns everyone for that effect on its own, for its own purpose. And I think that's where you're seeing a lot of the dismay across the world.
Charlie, I hear you and I feel you, but this is Bernie's political revolution. I mean, the problem is what has been absolutely rejected by the people, by the governing electorate, the new governing majority of this country, is incrementalism. The idea is, yes, the average American the 78 million Americans who voted for Trump, right? I'm not saying they get into the weeds of the macroeconomics. No, what they understand is that they can't access the American dream anymore. What they understand very clearly is that inflation became a thing for the first time in 25 years under Joe Biden. It wasn't a thing under W. It wasn't a thing under Obama. It wasn't a thing under Trump 1. It became a thing since 2021, since we came out of COVID. It wasn't Biden's fault, but he acted as if as if he didn't have to do anything about it. My point is this. My point is, yes, this is the thread. The same American electorate who threw out the incumbents here is the same Democratic electorate who threw out the incumbents in Canada, in Japan, in Germany, across Europe, in the UK, across the entire global north. For the first time in history, all incumbent governments got voted out. Okay, there is something going on here. What is going on here is globalization did not serve the large majority of the middle class and working class globally, right? And so they're all throwing it out. We can debate on how inelegant Trump's methodology is. You're right. He's taking a sledgehammer to globalization with absolute global tariffs, 3 tiers of tariffs. I agree with that, right? He's taken a sledgehammer to American hegemony, the idea of America being the solo superpower in the world, totally acknowledging that we live in a world of three superpowers and that we're going to start talking to them and we're going to start negotiating with them to settle our differences instead of fighting these forever surrogate wars. This is a sledgehammer to the neoliberal project. This is a sledgehammer to the neoconservative project, right? It is not incremental. I mean, what do we think Bernie was going to do? With his rhetoric, talk about the political revolution. It was going to be radical change, and anytime you have radical change, there is no question it is going to be collateral damage from people who benefited from the old system. But the old system had to go because it
But
was
from a
not working for most
political
people.
perspective, like he's making the exact same mistake in a different way that Biden did, which is taking a very close election and treating it as a mandate. It absolutely was not. Biden did
Right.
the same thing. He made this mistake rather than be the bridge and be the adult in the room and settle things down. He had this, he started believing he was the reincarnation FDR, and he was going to create the New Deal via Biden.
Biden had no basis to do that.
The country
Well,
wasn't
Biden came to that belief during the midterms. He felt like the midterms were his mandate, and that was not what happened. What happened was Roe versus Wade got overturned. There was a lot of angry voters, and the midterms swung Biden's way. It had nothing to do with his leadership, and he misread it. And like Charlie says, Donald Trump is misreading. The only time people say I have Trump, what is it, derangement disorder? I have Trump supporter derangement disorder. I don't have Trump derangement disorder. I don't understand the misunderstanding that Trump's sledgehammer, or I call it wrecking ball effect, is just that. There is no process in place. There is no chapter or verse in place. There is just this thing, I said I'm going to do it, so here we go. And it's destructive, and it's not going to replace
thing, right? Like, move fast, break things, as if that can be done. What's done in tech can be done in governance. It just is not so.
No.
Okay. Let's unpack some of this that we said. Let's start with this whole idea of mandate. Okay, so have you all looked at the demographics of the voting trends of the 2024 election versus the 2020 election? Because yes, we have been, for the last several election cycles on the presidential level, we have been a 50+1 divided electorate. So, which is different than the kind of blowouts you had in 2004, or Reagan's blowout winning 49 states in 1984. We are a much more closely divided country.
It's kind of amazing that we're able to sustain that razor thin. It is fascinating. It seems almost impossible that we could be that close to this 50-50 in terms of voting, but we really are. I mean, it is ridiculously,
what it is, Charlie. But then look at this election. This is what I'm saying. So within the context of us having razor close elections, right? Okay, look at the 2024 election. If you look at the voting trends between 2020 and 2024, more women, more young people, more Hispanics, more Blacks, right, voted for Trump in 2024 than in 2020 versus the Democratic nominee Biden in 2020 or Kamala Harris in 2024. All 50 states voted more for Trump in 2024 than the Democratic alternative in 2020. 98% of all counties in the country voted more for Trump than the Democratic alternative. Starrs County, Texas, is a border county in Texas, the most Hispanic county in the country, 96% Hispanic, voted the Democratic nominee for president every year since 1896 and voted for Trump by 16 points. What I'm saying to you here is, if you examine the demographic distribution of Trump's support, it is the most powerful mandate we've had since 1984. No, it's not going to be a 55-45 aggregate split where he has like 10 million more votes. No, We're at a much closer place in our voting history. But if you look at the distribution of the votes, of the support, no, the percentage of black vote that voted Republican this time brings us all the way back to pre-FDR, where the Republican Party was the party of Lincoln, right? Right. The percentage of Hispanic votes that voted for the Republican Party is unheard of in modern history. That's what I'm saying. And like I said, all those other demographics increase. So this is the basis of his mandate, right? The idea to poo-poo that away and say that the only people who are voting for him is either ignorant or misogynist or whatever, not when you look at the demographic distribution.
I don't see his supporters as that at all. Really, I think that's completely poor interpretation. I agree with you that people are they're voting based on their own personal lives, but they see
Yes.
in front of them what's going on with them. It's not an in-depth thing about values so much as it is about what they want in their own lives and for their own families. A lot of it's a failure when it comes to politics. Part of it, failure of the Democratic Party in messaging, of reaching out. Most it made me think when you were talking about your own background. I was thinking about how naturally conservative most immigrants are, right? They're very. I dated a girl from Panama. She was at Rhode Island School of Design. She lived there through the Noriega thing. I remember her telling me stories about when we first got involved, and she started hearing the bombs drop. She thought it was Noriega's having another one of his parties. She loved this country. Absolutely, like as conservative and patriotic a person you'd ever find, because she saw the other side of it. She saw, us as liberators, and her values. I think that's very similar to, a lot of people, particularly people, newer to the country, and the immigrant voting bloc. I mean, they are naturally. It shouldn't be. I guess what I'm trying to say. It shouldn't be surprising that is the lean. That it's a more conservative lean. It's always been there. It's just a matter of tapping into it. And I think the Republican Party's just done a much better job at that, of reaching to those people and understanding how they feel about this. The Democratic Party just kind of got lost in what they, what their identity was.
Well, here's their loss. Here's where they got lost. America is center right. If not, there is conservatives. And there's center right Americans. There's Reagan Democrats that are center right.
Yeah.
What happened with Trump is this is not a giant mandate. He completely aligned himself with with basically the Christian conservative. So, for example, this is basically what's happening is called ZBB in governing. It's called zero-based budgeting. You take over a company and it's just a company in dire straits, and every department has to justify their expenses every year. At the end of that year, if they don't justify those expenses are gone. And the next year is the same thing. So basically it's cut, and the theory is cutbacks don't come back. So in governing, you could never justify spending. Basically, when you're justifying giving things away. So the way Trump justified it is using the catchword DEI. We're going to justify it by saying it doesn't align with the president's values because it's got a DEI tone to it. So to cut in governing. So he aligned himself with the Christian right by calling everything gay bad. He's whacking things off the table. But the fact of the matter is that we're in dire straits now. This Trump approach has put us in a terrible situation. So for anybody to tell me that Trump has created this enormous fundamental movement, it's not true. He got voted in by a small margin. I've pointed this out before. In order to win the presidency, you both, Republicans and Democrats, both get the 220 electoral votes. In order to get the 270, you need the 7 swing states. Trump won 3 of those 7 swing states by 1.5%. It wasn't a matter of people believing in Trump. It was a matter of better the devil you know. Kamala had no chance to present herself as a candidate. Trump came along as the devil you know, so he won.
Well,
Now,
he's
I mean,
also.
That is quite the rationalization. First and foremost, he won all 7 of those
In
of those swing states. Which when's the last time that has happened?
But
I'm
when,
just I'm
like
saying.
Charlie said, not to get into the election, but by small, I mean by
Yeah.
But
minuscule
that's
percentages.
not by.
Look at Wisconsin. Both of the last 2 elections, Wisconsin was what, 20,000 votes, maybe. Either way,
But
both times.
your point is well taken that the margins by historical standards are small, right? But I mean, but these are margins that every election over the last several elections have
Right.
been. This is the trend because we are more of a divided and entrenched divided nation. But the 2024 election was an expansion of the historical margins. And it's pervasive. I cannot say this enough. What major segment of what major demographic segment of our country did not vote more for Trump this time, right? I mean, you have the
Oh,
professional
listen,
class that voted more for
I was
Kamala. You had extreme wealth who voted more for Kamala, and everyone else voted for Trump.
no, I
Because
was
they
absolutely
understood
stunned.
his approach is
I really
reckless.
believed, like leading up to the last 10 years, I thought, as this country becomes more diverse and younger, that it's really going to go the other way. It's the exact opposite of what I predicted. That it's gone the other way. That the younger vote, the more diverse vote, is actually gone the other way. It's
The
not at
reason why
all
is,
what I expected.
Charlie, there's no meaningful path of economic opportunity. I
Sure.
mean, okay, Coach
Listen,
Trippy, you have a 17-year-old and a 13-year-old. Me and my wife, we have 4 adult children, and I can tell you, right, it is brutally hard to try to make it. I mean, whether you, and the thing is, the demarcation line, and historically has been whether you can get a college degree. Well, now it's 6 figures to get a college degree. Most people can't afford it without going bankrupt and stuff like that. And so that closes off one avenue. If you don't get a college degree, the range of career opportunities that you could engage in that could give you the opportunity to save for retirement and send your kids to college and buy a home don't even hardly exist. You have to be an entrepreneur. You have to create your own business, which is a sliver of historical population of people who have the innovation and the capability and the gumption and or whatever to start their own business. So this is why so many of our young people are moving right, right? Because the economic policies of the last 30 years have totally abandoned them.
No, listen, I agree, and the Republican Party and Donald Trump in particular have been masterful in tapping into that grievance, which is a real thing. Problem
Grievance
is
politics.
they don't have,
Bernie did the
but they
same
don't
thing.
have they don't have a policy to answer those problems though. They can
No,
get
they
people
don't.
to vote for change, but there's no policy. The change that they want, they're not providing them anything. You're not
The
providing
po-
the change they want by just completely dismantling the entire system. Like
I,
that,
I beg to
that
differ with you,
stirs
Charlie.
people's anger, but it doesn't provide them results. I mean, where are the results of that?
I beg to differ, Charlie. Yes, in 2016, Trump had no idea. He didn't think he was going to win. This was all about this was something else. And then basically he did win, and basically they brought in the neocons, and he ran a basic Republican presidency, tax cuts, all that stuff. Okay. This time around, his whole policy team between the RFK and the Tulsi Gabbard and the Elon Musk and all that, all of which are centrist Democrats. I mean, this is how polarizing we've become. We forget that Trump actually moved to the center last year, right? Because all his key policy people, because he's not a policy wonk, right? Are centrist Democrats.
Policy. He doesn't know policy. I mean, he is just he he has
W didn't know
he does
policy.
not have his own belief system. He would adopt whatever would get him elected. He's really
He's a sales
just
guy.
the Heritage
You're right.
Foundation as a figurehead. That's it. He figured out this is a way to win. I don't think he has any real beliefs at all as a person. I think he's an empty vessel. And so, and he's the perfect, they found in him the perfect instrument to basically take over, the policies that they've been cooking up for the last 20 years.
I just had this argument.
Yeah.
I just had this argument with my brother, right, about Trump, Project 2025, and the Heritage Foundation. I am telling you, I'm just going to say the same thing I said to you that I said to my own brother, right? Trump could care less about the Heritage
Of
Foundation. This
course.
is not Project 2025. If you analyze what is the strength of Donald Trump, right? Because the problem is we talk about him like he has no capability, like he's just an empty vessel. He is not.
He
You
is.
you
Oh,
can't
he's
have the
absolutely an
no no
empty.
no no no
He's
no.
an empty
He
vessel.
He has
is
no belief system
he
whatsoever.
there is so many. I have spent most of my life with contempt for Trump. He's from Queens. I'm from the Bronx. I know his people. There's a lot of issues I have with Trump, but that doesn't mean he has no talent, right? He has no ability.
I'm not saying
What
it's no
his ma-
talent. I said he has no belief system.
okay,
He
what
has a
his
talent
master
in being whatever best serves him. I mean,
you are
what
speaking
changed in his
to
life that made him from a Democrat to Republican? What
but
happened
he
to Donald Trump? Did some
no no
event happen that changed his beliefs? No.
opportunistic, completely
Yes.
opportunistic. He
Yeah.
is a marketing guy. That's all I'm saying. What Trump is a brand looking for a product. Trump is, that's all he is. He's a marketing guy, but that's his brilliance. He read the American electorate, and the American electorate was anti-establishment. The problem with the Democratic Party over the last three presidential elections is that they didn't care that their own electorate was anti-establishment, that their own electorate was saying this is not working for us. They didn't care, and when they had their own candidates who were tapping into that, Bernie Sanders, right? What did the established Democratic Party do? They smothered it. So then those people who are not stupid went to Trump, but he understands who elected him. And so his policy is to reverse globalization. His policy is to reverse American hegemony, right? These are the two major building blocks of the geopolitical and economic policy of Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Biden, Kamala Harris, the Cheneys, the neocons and the neoliberals over the last 35 years. They built American hegemony, the unipolar country, and globalization. And those two policies abandoned the American middle class, abandoned the American working class, right? And so all he's doing is yes, he is reversing globalization through tariffs, through severe universal tariffs, right? Only Russia and Belarus are exempted.
No,
Okay.
Russia and North Korea, I thought. Well, I mean,
No, it's
obviously,
Belarus. We don't have any trade with North Korea, but
right, right. That's
Belarus
the
was
thing is,
the,
it's
the
just right. That's what I was going to say is, but that was
yeah.
what the media published was Russia. But now let's take it from the top here for a minute. First of all, you're not reversing globalization. Just say, for example,
He's
Charlie
trying to.
talks about
That's what
this.
he's trying
He's
to.
trying to with his tariffs, this list. Like I said, he went to Quick Science. He produced these two chloroplast pictures of base. Okay, for example, let's take this small country that was producing Levi's jeans. Levi comes back and builds this giant factory to produce their own jeans in America. This is the
Yeah.
fundamental. This is the fundamental succession that he's looking for.
Yes.
That we're going to build this factory somewhere. Who cares where? Dothan, Alabama, Arkansas, Texas. Now you've got American workers saying, okay, I want to come back to work in this factory. Now you're going to have the issue of this factory is going to have to be air conditioned. The American workers are not going to
Yes.
work in a heated, in
Yes.
a no
Costs are going to
environmentally
go up.
protected building under sewing machines. You've got this
You,
issue of wage. So my point being, without me just going on and on about the ongoing issues,
yeah.
and the environmental issues of producing these jeans, because somewhere in that small country they're taking these dyes and they're pouring them out the back door
Yes.
into some ravine, whereas now
Right.
you've got
It's
the
our
so
ocean,
now a
and so
price of
yeah,
jeans goes
it's going to
from
go up.
$24 to
Yes.
$95. Realistically, the cost is incredible, the
But
difference.
here's the thing. That's where we
So
were
my
in the
point is,
70s and the 60s. No, what you're missing is that the job that pays far more money can afford to pay that increased
it's
cost.
not
That's
gonna
that's where
happen
we
is what I'm
were. Yes,
saying.
it's going to
Also,
happen.
the other thing
American
also that
capital is already reallocating. It's going to take it. The horrible thing about there's going to be so much pain. It's going to be inflationary until until you have the factories here and you're hiring American workers, and our supply chains have been reshifted to the domestic market. In the meantime, you're right, you're going to have an inflationary experience. But let me bring you back to how do we break the back of stagflation coming out of the 1970s? Paul Volcker raised interest rates in 1980 by 11 percentage points in 1 year. Was it inflationary? Hell yes. Right. But guess what? It led to the longest economic growth spurt in history up to that point during the last 6 years of the Reagan administration.
And it
My
also
point
led
being,
to a 50-year history of low inflation rates. After Paul Volcker, we
yes,
never heard of a mortgage above 5%.
yeah. Okay, now
Okay,
here's
so
the
this is the
thing.
same thing we're going to wind up with is globalization 2.0. We're going to
He's
wind up.
revert.
You're
No,
talking about the man.
coach.
Let me tell you one thing about Donald
But
Trump.
coach, you're obscuring my. I'm just trying to make a point. It's going to be inflationary for the next year or two or three, however long it takes for us to bring production back. Charlie was just talking about how COVID and the Great Recession demonstrated the fragility of globalization supply chains all over the world. Right. The only way to insulate from that insecurity is to reestablish domestic production. He is forcing that. That's what he's trying to do. It's going to be painful until the production comes back. If the production doesn't come back and it fails, it's going to be catastrophic for America. Absolutely right. We've never done it for a $27 trillion economy. We've never done it before.
But the thing is,
Reverse globalization.
you can throw, but this is why leadership matters. This is why the conversation about Trump being an empty vessel matters. What causes recession? Right? I was just reading about this yesterday. It's not policy. You can go policy one way or another. The reason those markets tank is because we don't know what's happening. This back and forth, this indecision, this lack of any faith, and we're going to stay this one course. That's why the markets did what they did. That's why they're going to continue to go down like that, because they don't know what to believe in. They don't
Charlie,
know.
that's only because the media fails to cover what they never distill.
Wait, the media's covering what he did. Look what he did initially with the tariffs with Mexico and Canada. We're going to impose these tariffs. Oh, now we're not going to. Oh, this week we're going to do it. Now we're going to do it again. Oh, this is an instrument to fight the fentanyl coming into this country. Well, no, it's really not about that. I mean, the market sees that there's no real, steady mission here, and that's where you're seeing the economic pain. If he followed this policy, if anyone had the belief that he was really going to stick with this all the way through, as you're saying, it would take years. And there's possibility it could work. But no one believes that he's going to stick with this.
It cannot be stuck
when the wind blows. If he sees the poll numbers going south as it gets near the midterms, you think he's really going to stick with this?
He's not going to
stick. Let's be clear. Charlie, that isn't even okay. First and foremost, we can't understand Trump if the methodology of understanding Trump is to criticize everything he's doing, is to say he's just an empty vessel. Then this is why we don't understand. He has campaigned extensively on his use of tariffs and talked about how he wanted to bring us back to the 1900 level of tariffs before we had federal income taxes and all this other stuff. There are tiers of different levels of tariffs. The initial tariffs he did when he first came into office had to do with renegotiating, issues relating to the border. But this week's tariffs is his global approach to the tariffs they're not the same methodologies, right? But we won't understand the thread if everything he does is viewed in a jaundiced eye. In other words, there's nothing, Coach Trippy, Charlie, if I looked at you.
He makes it impossible not to have that eye. Look at the.
You have to have the jaundiced eye.
Look at the.
I don't have that eye.
Let me give you a clear example.
I'm trying to understand him.
Let me give you a clear example of a policy wonk. Let me give you a clear example of a policy wonk, jaundiced eye. Keep in mind, I'm going back a little, so it's a segue. We had this issue at North Korea.
Yes.
Donald Trump said, I told Kim Jong-un I got a bigger button on my desk than he has. He flies to North Korea, and I'm getting to a point here. He
Yeah.
lands Air Force One on the DMZ. He shakes hands with a North Korean general that probably ordered the torture and killing of Otto Warmbier, our beautiful American college student. During his presentation, he has an iPad in his hand, and he shows Kim Jong-un a picture of a single rail system, a high-speed single rail system running through Pyongyang. That is the acknowledgement that the understanding in the future of world economics is North Korea will be the world center of cheap labor at some point in time. It was his acknowledgement of globalization. If you're going to have a single rail, high rail speed system in Pyongyang in the middle of North Korea, it's going to be to transport workers to their factories where they're going to dye Levi's jeans for 30 cents an hour. They're going to ship them to America for $1, and they're going to get things back to prices like they were before. The notion this is where the jaundice eye comes from. The notion that we're going to literally build a factory, an environmentally friendly factory with worker-friendly amenities to make Levi's jeans in America and ultimately be able to sell them at the price difference that's going to incur is just creates the jaundice eye that this whole policy is asinine.
Coach Trippy, look at how you interpreted his trip to North Korea. This is exactly, you're
As a
right. You're
total
making
failure and
you,
a weak
no,
man
no,
bowing to a torturous, cruel dictator that
you
killed our college students.
can I offer an alternative interpretation, please? Right.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
my
Because
interpretation, though.
right. Because again, him showing a single rail, high speed rail, which would be a domestic infrastructure thing in North Korea, right, is not about taking advantage of cheap North Korean labor. The idea of whose button is bigger is North Korea is becoming a nuclear power who can
They are a
distribute.
nuclear power.
Yes, who can distribute. That's right. And what he was going there to do is to repair relations with North Korea, and he did that. He did. I mean, it's that. I mean, that's he's trying to end the threat of nuclear war. That was the point of that trip. It wasn't to open up cheap labor in North Korea. I mean,
It clearly was.
no, no, it's not.
You can't
No,
have an
no, it's
economic dynamo
no,
without an
no,
economic
no, no, no,
policy.
no,
And
no,
in
no, no,
order for
no.
North Korea to
He
be a
didn't.
part of that
Hold on.
economic policy would take
He
globalization.
There was no economic deal involved in that trip.
It was the
That
idea
was
he emulated Richard Nixon's move in China, and he was trying to duplicate that move
no,
in North
no,
Korea.
he was trying to settle a festering conflict because North Korea was perfecting its ability to distribute its nuclear missile. It was already, Japan was already at risk. The west coast of the United States could soon be at risk. He was trying to talk to a leader who has nuclear weapons.
So what did he accomplish? What was the result of that? What was
What?
the accomplishment?
What? No, no, no.
What did that do?
I hear you. I hear you. Go back to Obama and Hillary Clinton's debate. The idea when Hillary said that you don't talk to your enemies, and Obama properly said that's ridiculous. That you have to talk to your enemies. Historically, you have to talk to your enemies. What he did was he literally did improve relations with Kim.
In
Right?
what
That is what he did.
how
No,
they
but
improved?
what? No,
They,
no, no.
they haven't
The
reduced
point.
their weapons program.
No, 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 because what did Biden follow it up with?
No,
We
I'm
have
not saying the
no,
what
no.
about. I'm just saying this
My,
one
my,
singular thing. Tell me what Trump accomplished with that
the
trip to
point is
Korea.
that
Nothing.
foreign policy takes the continuity of administrations, right? He was elected. This is from his first term, right? What he tried to do, he wasn't trying to come up with a new economic deal and produce cheap labor, products in North Korea. I mean, that's absurd. That is the kind of interpretation that says he doesn't make any sense. He was talking to our arch enemy, axis of evil, saying, you know what? We can actually do business. And guess what? They came out of that conversation calming the threat. The idea that wasn't that you talk about revisionist history, it did improve the relations with North Korea.
It
The
didn't do
problem
it. It
is
didn't.
is is that
in what tangible way? I'm just. I'm
and
I'm trying to understand that too, because
what
What changed? What changed?
The tangible, Charlie.
Let me give you an example.
In
Hang on,
order-
let me pause
when
this for
we
one
talk
second.
about okay.
Let me pause this. Let me give you an example of revisiting history. Where I was a Ronald Reagan Democrat. Omar Gaddafi sent over terrorists to blow up a casino in Italy that American military frequented. Ronald Reagan responded by sending F-16s in and taking out bases, including his own home, which unfortunately his 3-year-old child died. But you know what? Libya changed its ways after that one action. Gaddafi became a lot less sponsor of world terrorism than before. So basically, my point is, after Otto Warmbier was returned in the condition he was returned in, after being held illegally as a prisoner because he took a banner down from a floor in a hotel, we should have responded militarily. We should have sent
against
an
a
aircraft.
nuclear power country? Against North Korea?
Okay, so let me tell you about Israel just responded militarily to Iran, more sophisticated nuclear power than North Korea, and shuttered their whole entire operation. Sometimes you take a stand. And there's 2 points to this stand with Iran, which I'm not going to get into, but the JPOC, the Joint Protection Act by Obama, reining in Iranian economy and consoling the Iranian younger generation into giving them some sort of economic hope is one way. But the other way is military action. And the other way with North Korea is either military action, which no longer is justified because we can't just recreate an old scenario. But now the other way to actually make North Korea change its ways is to rein it in economically. It's going to happen. And
North
it's not going to
Korea
be
is
a
not gonna
part of
change
this
its-
globalization policy that Trump's trying to cultivate.
Coach Trippy, I hear you. North Korea is not going to change their policy because when Gaddafi changed his policy, gave up his nuclear program, what did Hillary do? We came, we saw, he died.
The
Kim
people,
watched.
the American people did not kill
The
Gaddafi.
United States, no, what do you mean? The United States destabilized Gaddafi's government, and NATO was involved in the overthrow, and then his own, and then enemies in
The
his state.
people overthrew
No,
Gaddafi.
stop. We did that to him, and you know it. Hillary takes credit for it. She made a joke about it. This is so. So you think Kim is going to negotiate with us? You think he's going to give up his nuclear weapons? You want to use a nuclear? You want to see what Kim would join the United States as the only country in the world to ever launch a nuclear missile against another country if we forced his hand. He's not going to be Gaddafi getting killed, slaughtered in the back of a truck. Right. Okay. That's the problem with U.S. foreign policy. Right. Is that, yes, we did. You can effectively get someone to yield, but then does it benefit them to do that?
I don't want to go into military action where it's not needed, and I don't promote. What I'm saying is, we went off on a tangent here. We're on globalization, and we're on the idea that we're going to take a wrecking ball to it, and Donald Trump is going to have an ultimate success story.
But if I think
no. Let me be clear. I am just talking about
leadership, though, because to compare Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump, I mean, it's so frustrating to me as someone who grew up in the Reagan years, the formative years, right, in a Democratic family. But an appreciation for what Ronald Reagan was able to do. He was masterful at geopolitics. That is not who Donald Trump is.
No.
That's an absolute joke.
No.
So
but I'm not saying
he's a product of television. If it were not for the producers of The Apprentice, Donald Trump would probably be penniless and just a joke caricature of history, right? They went in there, they put him on that show, they went to the Trump Tower, they saw what an absolute joke the whole thing was. They recreated the entire image, recreated his image, made him to be a successful businessman that he absolutely was not, right? But they were brilliant at making him into this image that didn't really exist. I don't believe that.
Not Trump. Trump didn't do that, right?
Was depth and mission with Ronald Reagan's policies. I don't believe that in Donald Trump. I have no question.
Well, that was the point I was making.
Charlie, I hear you, but the thing about it is no one was making the case that Donald Trump and Ronald Reagan were the same level of
but his support all the time. They always do that. They may if he has similar values
they do.
But that's
Reagan. He does
In
it.
the context of this conversation, I'm not going to give the most ridiculous Democratic arguments and say, Charlie, this is how you think. I'm saying, I mean, I was not saying, I'm just saying within the context of this conversation, I am not saying that Donald Trump is Ronald Reagan. What I am saying here is that what he is, I mean, our contempt blinds us to what he is. I mean, he's not just a failure. Right? The reason why The Apprentice worked was because of Donald Trump. The only thing he does is make himself a brand. The only thing he does is give the image of luxury that he's success. That is his whole shtick since the 90s, right? All I am saying to you is he's good at that. He's good at that, right? I mean, if you can't admit that that's what his strength is. So he is a brand looking for a
listen, I
product.
fully admit that, and I think it's just
I admit it too.
travesty.
So
that's
if he's
the leader of this country.
if
That
he
a convicted felon and an adjudicated rapist is at the highest office in this country. Those aren't facts that can really be debated, right?
Yes, they can, Charlie. Yes, they can.
And ergo,
Okay,
my Trump
no,
supporter derangement syndrome.
No, let me ask you guys a question. Okay, when Obama got elected, in November 2008 and came to office, does anyone remember how everyone was pushing him hard to indict George W. Bush and Dick Cheney for the torture regime, Abu Ghraib and all that stuff? You remember? And what did Obama say? Obama said, no, I'm not going to do that. Why? Because it caused a constitutional crisis. And he was right. He was right. The idea of one administration indicting a previous administration would have caused a constitutional crisis. This is the travesty of what Joe Biden did. It's not like no president has ever done anything wrong, and then all of a sudden we had Donald Trump. The hubris of Joe Biden to sick the Democratic state attorney generals and his Justice Department on a previous president, right?
So wait, Joe Biden, and if I hear the reason that he was adjudicated
guys, I have a JD.
He's a self-admitted sexual predator, right?
Look,
we have the tapes on that.
I am not.
The guy's a self-admitted. The leader of our country is a self-admitted sexual predator. That is an absolute fact. We have the tapes. You can call it.
All I can say to you is, what was John Kennedy and what was, come on. I mean, are you really? Seriously, look at the history of our country. You look at the president. Are you really, just because we never
philandering Jack Kennedy is the same thing as grab him by the pussy?
All I'm saying to you is, all I'm saying to you is
30 plus women of sexual assault.
No, Charlie, all I'm saying
that wasn't created by Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton or anyone else. That goes back to the 80s.
Charlie, I'm
the guy's been a criminal his entire life. His entire life.
Can we both talk? I am not talking about whataboutism. What I'm saying is to act as if the history of our presidents were all George Washington, no one could tell a lie, and then we elected a rapist is both untrue and naive. It's not true. We have a history of not prosecuting our presidents. You telling me that the Washington D.C.
Wait, what does the sexual assault have to do with policy?
No. What I am saying to you, what I'm saying to you is that Donald Trump, prior to being president of the United States, had no criminal record, none. Okay. That the very nature of political prosecution is that the reason why he had no criminal record. So that's factually true. All these allegations came up through the Democratic Party pursuing a former president. We didn't do in the same. No. We didn't do that.
The sexual assault stuff predates him even being in politics.
Yes, but not the charges.
In politics. It predates him being in politics.
Time out. He had no criminal record before he took office in 2016. Yeah, all these incidents occurred beforehand. Okay,
well, let's put it this way.
No, my point being here is Joe Biden prosecuted a previous president right? And he opened up the Pandora's box
Wait, Joe, how did Joe Biden
But
prosecute?
as far as the previous president being
he
prosecuted, hang on, let me say this real quick.
this
Let
is
me say this.
why Obama didn't prosecute Cheney. This is
Okay,
why
so but let
Obama
me
didn't
say this.
prosecute W.
As far as a presidential action being prosecuted and Obama choosing not to has been answered by a Supreme Court justice, Chief Justice, that I respect, John Roberts, said a president must be bold in his actions. That was clearly the ruling on certain things questioned about presidential prosecution. We're past that. What we're talking about now is did Obama do the right thing? Yes. You're not going to prosecute an administration for torturing prisoners. That was the question that was asked. Obama said, we're not going to prosecute. Then later on, down the road, the Supreme Court answered the question. Did the president order basically the ruling will say, did the president order the torture of prisoners? And the answer will be yes. And is he allowed to do so? And the answer will be yes, because of John Roberts, who wrote the written argument, a president must be bold in his actions. A question and answer has been that. Then comes the question of salacious behavior. Like I said, when Steve Cook took over Apple, there was no question of his personal behavior. He took over the company, the world's most powerful, valuable company, $3 trillion market valuation. No one asked about his personal behavior. No one asked that he may be the only openly gay CEO there's no issues. So let's put all the issues behind us as far as Trump. Now let's talk about taking the wrecking ball to globalization. Let's get back to that. Like you said, there's going to be pain. Will that pain be sustainable? No. He's going to reverse policy within a year. We're already
Coach
seeing
Trippy,
that.
do you really think, first and foremost, notwithstanding him making progressives' head explode by talking about a third term,
It's not
the
making my.
fact, no, no,
I think
no,
it's the silliest thing I've ever heard in my life. One of his
yes, of course it
arguments
is.
is
He's just he says this. Joe Rogan was absolutely right. He says crazy shit all the time.
but
That's
he's doing
okay.
crazy shit now.
No, yeah, and he does some crazy shit too. You're absolutely right. But the thing is, he's crazy like a fox. There are things he's actually trying to do. There are things he's actually committed to do. The idea that there's no thread, it's all just noise, it's all just nonsense,
But
is
it seems that
is
putting aside character and everything else, let's go back to policy. What you're saying, it seems like he's trying to embrace almost like a Chinese, right, way about going about things in terms of policy. This idea that we will have the patience the way China can do it, right? They look in terms of hundreds and hundreds of years going
Right.
forward,
We look
right?
at 4 years.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Or not even two.
he's a
Right?
lame duck president. This is why he can do it.
This philosophy is if there was some belief that they could actually stick through this, even if I don't agree with the policy, if there was a belief that we were actually going to stick to this and get through these tough years and somehow reverse the ill effects of globalization, I would be on board. But
Okay,
I don't
but
see that being. I don't see the discipline in his administration or him as a leader to see that through. He will not.
But
get
what's
through
going
the
to induce
difficult
him to
time.
change course? Because the
Well,
polls are
what will
not going
induce him to
to.
change course? I'll tell you this. What
What's
will
going to
not
change?
induce him to one, if he does miserably in the midterms, which could if the kind of pain you're talking about occurs in the next year or so,
It
when
will.
it comes
It
time, we could
absolutely
even
will.
retake the Senate.
No, no.
Okay.
Let us so that we are clear about this. First and foremost, Trump does not have to run for re-election ever again. He could care less about the polls. One. Two, when you look at the Republican support, right, he is not, in fact, he's not bleeding at all. Right, right. If you're talking about the Democrats actually putting up an alternative or during the midterms, all he has is these 2 years. Oh, in his last 2 years, he's done. So it is in these 2 years before the midterm elections that will he get his tariff regime endorsed by Congress? Constitutionally, he can't do what he's doing. He's just doing it. The Congress will have to endorse it. And if you have credible challenge to the U.S. Supreme Court, even a conservative court
What is that
will
trick thing
rule.
that the Speaker of the House did where he changed the timeline? So basically, like a minute is a year. That's how they prevent them from bringing that vote up on the floor to take back his ability, this ridiculous economic emergency.
But
Yes,
keep
he's
in
great. He's
mind,
great. He's done it
you're
under
seeing a
emergency. Yes.
you're
to
seeing a
assert all this
legislator
power.
rebel against him already, because
Oh,
just the
he's
other day, Mike Johnson walked out like a deer in the headlights when they voted not to disallow pregnant congresswomen from voting remotely. And he said, this just shuts down our agenda. I mean, he literally made the statement, the things we're trying to do. So you're already seeing a congressional rebellion, a
well.
Republican congressional
Well,
rebellion.
let's put it this way. Yeah, we're not seeing anything because they haven't given him a loss yet. All I'm saying to you here is this: is that he can absolutely fail if the Congress doesn't endorse his global tariff regime. They have to, in
I
order for
think they
it,
will.
in
I think
order for it to have
they'll follow
legs.
that. They'll follow that.
If they don't do it, then all he's done is shredded our international relationships. Because really, look what he's doing with our European partners. Look what he's doing with Japan. Look what he's doing with South Korea. Look what he's doing to Vietnam. These tariffs are severe on all these
Oh
countries.
wait, you know,
So
didn't he carve out something with Vietnam though? I,
no,
yeah, no, I think they did.
no.
I think no, I think did like a little side deal where Vietnam's off the table.
The Vietnam, no. There are individual countries
Our
who are
coffee.
desperately trying to negotiate a deal. Nothing has been formalized. All I am trying to say here is that he can fail. Sure, he can fail, but he has actually
Stuff.
done what cannot be undone. I'm telling you, no one in the world trusts the United States now that we have engaged in a global, we violated every treaty, international trade treaty, right? A global tariff regime, 10% across the board, except for two countries, right? And then 25% for certain countries, and then 40% for China and other countries like India. Look, that horse is out the barn. The
Well, you could
only
say that.
question is whether Congress will endorse it. If Congress doesn't endorse it, right, it will fail at the Supreme Court level if he has a credible challenge, because the president doesn't have the authority to do that. He's using his claim, his defense is that it's an emergency. Let's see if that carries. If that carries, right? In my opinion, I think it's dubious that it would. But the point is he's already committed his presidency to it. There is no unringing this bell.
No, I'm going to tell you, there is.
Globalization is
You can put that
fatally
horse
flawed.
back in the barn, because here's what's going to happen ultimately. And I'm concerned about some things that are not going to happen and some things that are not. One, there's going to be an ultimate challenge. A tariff is a tax, and tax are implemented by Congress. So there was an
Congress.
old school theory.
Yeah.
Presidents don't write laws, they just sign them into law. The tariff is the one gray area. This tariff thing is going to, even if it hits the desks of six conservative Supreme Court justices, clearly conservative justices are clear on taxation code, on taxation.
Mhm.
This tariff thing is going to ultimately take it out of the president's hands. It is no longer to be, I do not see this going on any longer than this term, or maybe into the next term of some president, that tariffs are going to be something the president can implement with the stroke of a pen. It is a tax, and it
Well,
is
like
one
I
he
said,
has
I agree
clearly
with you, Coach.
abused. So
I agree
right
with you.
there, when that Supreme Court momentum happens and that ruling comes down that literally taxes and tariffs have to be imposed by Congress only, it's going to reimpose faith in the world that they can do business with us again.
What I'm saying to you here, though, is that do do the Republican Party do harikari on themselves by not endorsing his tariffs? I'm telling you, this Congress, Mike Johnson, will endorse
I'm not
these
Oh,
so
I
sure
tariffs.
about
absolutely agree
that.
with
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Absolutely,
And as
I
soon
agree.
as that
I'm not at
happens,
all.
it's no, absolutely. Again, where's the loss? There was no way Tulsi Gabbard was going to be approved. There was no way RFK was going to
But
be
now
approved. There was no way
we're
the
learning
FBI
the
director was going to be
lessons of,
approved.
we all objected to Hegsworth being the defense secretary, and you're
Yeah.
saying where's the loss? But now we're clearly learning the loss. Tulsi Gabbard being the national security advisor, the person that consolidates 18 reports every morning from 18 different intelligence agencies, doesn't even know how to transport information safely. They were on basically And again, oh, it's just a signal. It's just an incident. She was the
That
national security advisor, a part
that
of
is,
that text chain. So
all I can
there's the
say to
loss. When Americans want to come to the
no,
realization where the loss is, they need to be lobbying their congressmen to understand where the loss is.
the significance of Tulsi Gabbard as a director of national intelligence is to end the practice of funneling billions, trillions of dollars to finance counterinsurgencies in foreign countries that create the conflicts that allow us to flood the zone with weapons and create the forever wars. This is what we did in Ukraine. This is what we've done all around the world. She is doing that. That not some nonsense about communicating, because stupid Hegseth or the National Security Council uses a public,
It is a
app.
concern when the
That
national
is not
security
her
advisor
focus.
does not understand the issue.
You say
It's
that like it's a
it,
throwaway. You say that like it's a throwaway line.
it
Stupid.
is a throwaway.
He's the Secretary of Defense.
It
You don't
is
think it
it
matters that we have
no,
this meathead moron
Hegseth is
in the
no
Pentagon?
all the significance of Hegseth is to downsize the Department of Defense. If you That's just what I'm saying, talking about the thread. What is Trump trying to do? The reason why he selected Tulsi Gabbard is to end the forever wars, right? It's not Hegseth who's doing that. This not. I'm telling you, when Trump said he's going to negotiate with Russia and China to cut their nuclear defense budgets in half, right? It's because he's moving away from using the military and military force as a means of economics. That is the old regime. That is Clinton and Obama and W. That is the neoliberal, neoconservative regime that they're dismantling on the global stage, right? Right. All I'm saying to you here is that we waste a lot of time chasing all these nonsensical stories. Trump cares nothing about First Amendment and pro-Palestinian protesters defeat him there. He's not going to invest anything on that. Complain all you want their plans they're not trying to destroy the Houthis. Look at the Houthis for the last 10 years. Everyone has bombed them. We've bombed them forever. They know how to take the bombs. That's just cover for Netanyahu to give him some political, say, hey, you all gave me $100 million. Let me throw you a bone. The Houthis are still shutting down the Red Sea. Come on. All I'm saying is that we can't chase all these things as if they're all relevant, as they're all true.
We're not. We haven't stopped chasing them, and we've continued now to chase new things. The globalization, or therefore the dismantling of globalization, is a new giant issue America's facing.
It is.
And when you talk about Tulsi Gabbard being the one that's going to stop the forever wars and take the economics out of military action, now keep in mind, and I've said this so many times, the Ukraine war was such a research and development piece for our military, and it's Trump that dismantled it. The fact of the matter is, we've come to the realization that we can spend significantly less on the military. We don't need as many F-16s or F-47s because we need drones. And we come to the realization that drones can't be tracked if they're using fiber optics versus satellites or lasers. I mean, so now you're going from a $40 million plane to a $4,000 drone. But Trump doesn't want any part of that. He's completely cut off Ukraine from any ability to teach us more about how we can. Russia's been in Ukraine for 3 years now, and we've proven one thing: his military's inept. They're a bunch of drunken sloths. And
what are you talking about? Ukraine is about to be defeated.
After 3 years?
No. Well,
it's been 3 years.
So
Ukraine
let us understand.
From a country of Russia's size and girth and military ability, they should have been able to do it in 30 days. They're at 3 years now. I consider them no threat to our national security, knowing